Hey everybody! Oh, skipped to the wrong page. We're going to start here. We're going to talk today about converting between a fraction and a decimal. This has everything to do with dividing integers, and so we will do so. So go ahead and make this the title of the next page in your math notebook. You guys may have already figured both of these out. I've never taught it to you explicitly though, so let's make sure I do. And we'll go from there. So unpause when you're ready. Close your math notebook. Just think till we get to we do. Two things to remind you of before we start. First, fractions and division. So remember in our last mini lesson we talked about how things like negative 2 divided by 8 is another way of saying negative 2 divided by 8. These are the same thing. Fractions and division work the same way. It's going to be important today. And also, your very wise math teacher of the last 2 years has been insisting that you say decimals correctly. And today's going to be a big part of why he has been saying so. So he has made sure that if a decimal ends in one place, you say 8/10, because that is in the tenths place. Or if a decimal has 2 spots, you say 27/100ths, because that is in the hundredths place. And he has been insisting that if it has 3 decimals, you say 122 thousandths, because that is in the thousandths place. There are more places after that. I don't usually make you say those. We got tenths, hundredths, thousandths. The fourth place is the 10 thousandths. And then the next place is the 100 thousandths, and so on and so forth, millionths. It works just like it goes the other way. I don't usually make you say those, but it's good for you to know they're there just in case you get an extreme situation of what I'm going to show you today. Okay. So let's do it. So I'm going to convert a couple things from fraction to decimal, and then a couple things from decimal to fraction. These are the easiest, and I have a feeling about half of you have probably already figured this out because of your use of calculators, and a lot of you avoid fractions. So 2/5, if I want to make that into a decimal, remember there's a decimal, this is a part of a whole, and decimals also represent a part of a whole. And so I can change this to a decimal, and the way I do it is with that, it's like the opposite of doing the 2 divided by 5 trick. If I look at 2/5, I can also think of that as 2 divided by 5. And if I think of it that way, I can write 2 divided by 5. And if you've never thought to do it, you can just open up your calculator and do 2 divided by 5. Calculators will never give you a fraction answer. They just don't do that. But it will tell you the decimal. Boom. 4/10. So 2 divided by 2/5 is the same as 2 divided by 5 is the same as 4/10. So this fraction is equal to this decimal. That's it. Negative 9/8, if I want to write that as a decimal, that's the same as negative 9 divided by 8. 9/8 and 9 divided by 8, 9 divided by 8, 9 divided by 8. And I know my answer is going to be negative. I don't know if my calculator does positive and negative, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the negative sign there because I know a negative divided by a positive is going to be a negative. And I'll just do that. 9 divided by 8 is that. 1 and 125 thousandths. So it is 1 and 125 thousandths. All you have to do in a fraction to make it a decimal is do the division problem that it tells you to do. And that's usually easiest with a calculator. I could have done 9 divided by 8, and I would have made 1 and had, 1 left over, brought down to 0, and so on, had 1. I would have gotten the same thing if I did the long division. Calculator is just a lot faster. So that's all you have to do. So this fraction and this decimal are equal. It's just simple division. Other way. So this depends on you understanding how the place value works and how to say these the right way. Because if you can say this 48 hundredths the right way, then you can already write it as a fraction. 48 hundredths is 48 hundredths. Well, that sure was easy. Done. Usually when you do this, you don't stop there. We're going to usually find the lowest possible equivalent fraction. So like as I look at these, I can divide both by 4, I think, and get 12 25ths. And let's see, this can be divided by 5, and that's all, and this can't. So that's it. So 48 hundredths, you can write as 48 hundredths, and that's right, but typically we try to reduce it. We call it go to the lowest possible equivalent fraction, which would be 12 25ths. So this fraction and this decimal are equivalent. The way you can check and make sure is I can say, well, is 12 divided by 25 going to give me that? Let's make sure. 12 divided by 25. And it does, so I'm good. So I could even double check by going back and making sure. Pretty nice, huh? Same thing, so this is negative 625 thousandths. That's in the thousandths place. So I'm just going to rewrite that as negative 625 thousandths. Turns out that way of pronouncing the decimal is pretty handy after all, huh? So there's a basic one. That is not a wrong answer, but it's not a simplified answer. As I look at these, I can already tell I can divide the numerator and the denominator by 5, for starters. Jumps out right at me. Oh, did I close my calculator? There it is. 625 divided by 5 is 125. And 1,000 divided by 5 is 200. I can still keep dividing that. I think I can do 25, I'm going to notice. And that would be 5 on the top and 8 on the bottom. And I forgot some negative signs here. That was negative, so that was negative, so that was negative, so that's negative. So that's it. I just write it like I say it and find the lowest equivalent fraction. I'm going to check. I'm going to make sure 5/8 is equal to 625 thousandths. Let's make sure. 5 divided by 8. 5 divided by 8 is 625 thousandths. So I'm good. All right. Open your notebook. Let's do a couple together. Here they are. All right. Let's start with fraction to decimal. So I'm going to change that to a decimal. 25 twelfths. Remember, that's equal to 25 divided by 12. It's just two ways to write the same thing. And so I keep closing my calculator. There we go. 25 divided by 12 is, boom, oh. So this will happen sometimes. Sometimes it'll be a decimal that never ends. And I think we've kind of talked about how to write that. So that's 2 0/10ths, 800ths, and then the 3's start repeating. So I'm going to write 2, 0, 8, and then the 3 like that. You don't write the line over the whole thing because the whole thing doesn't repeat. Just the 3 repeats. 2.0833333333. Or you can say 2.083 repeating is also an acceptable way to say that. So 25 twelfths, and that makes sense, right? 24 twelfths would be 2. 25 twelfths is a little more than 2. This is a little more than 2. Seems pretty reasonable. All right, negative 1/20th. That's the same as, so I know it's going to be negative, so I may go ahead and write my negative over there. You know, that's going to be the same as negative 1 divided by 20. Negative 1 divided by 20. And that happens to be one I actually know in my head. which is 5/100. There it is. So since the fraction was negative, also the decimal would be negative. So this decimal is equal to this fraction. All right, let's go the other way. Decimal to fraction. So if you know how to say it, you know how to do it. 22/100 is the same as 22/100. Pretty handy, right? Same number, same value. And I would say stop there, except we like to get to the lowest common equivalent fraction. So like I look at this and I see I can divide both of these by 2 and get 11/50. 11 is a prime number, so there's nothing I can divide it by except 1 and 11, so I am done. And all I'm going to do is check it. I'm going to check it by doing 11 divided by 50 and making sure that that's what I get. 11 divided by 50 is 22/100. Check. All right, last one. Negative 125 thousandths is negative 125 thousandths. And okay, let's see, what can I divide these by? 25, right? 25 will go into this. 25 will go into this. And that will be 5. And that will be, let's see, 4 makes 10. 4 makes 100. So 40, I guess, would make 1,000. Is that right? And that's negative, so that's negative. So negative 5/40. Still not totally reduced, because I can do 5 on the top and 5 on the bottom. And that's going to give me negative 1/8. And so just to be sure, I'm going to check that 1/8 equals that. Eighth, and it does, so I'm good. So that decimal is equal to that fraction. And that, my friends, is how you do it. That's how you go back and forth between fractions and decimals. Super handy for those of you that really, really like to use the calculator, because fractions are a pain in the calculator. So if you know how to take a fraction and make it a decimal, you have a lot of flexibility with using your calculator, because you can always go fraction to decimal, do it in your calculator, then use this strategy to switch it back. Pretty nice. You're welcome. If this is confusing, please go back and watch the I do's or the we do's again so that you are a master of this when you get to class tomorrow. If you got it now, then I cannot wait to see you tomorrow and do a little more practice. Bye-bye.